Lovely cushion header. And Giroud! What a head, son! What a head! Aguero!
Hello and welcome back to the Premier League Trio podcast. My name is Hader and I'm your host as usual today. I hope you're all having a lovely weekend. And I've got a really special guest today, which I'm really excited to be talking to about some La Liga news and general transfer news. I'm joined today by Sam Marsden, who's a writer for ESPN and Diario Sport. Sam, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, hi there. Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
No problem. How's life in Barcelona?
Yeah, it's good. We've had a few storms this last week, but it's been really nice over the weekend, back to sort of that blistering heat. So you enjoy it a bit more than August because you know it's on the way out, so you've got to savor it. Whereas in August, it gets a bit too extreme and you're like, oof, I need to get out of this.
Absolutely. We've had a nice day for the first time in a while. It's been about 24 degrees. So just lapping it up before obviously the inevitable rain that we get in the UK. But let's just go straight into some transfers. And obviously it's a bit of silly season right now. We're approaching the deadline. A lot of Man United fans are clamoring to ask about Sergio Reguilon. So I just want to ask you, obviously there are reports that Real Madrid are willing to sell him. And obviously Manchester United are interested. It looks like Sevilla are going towards the Sporting left back now. So they look like they're out the picture. There are reports today as well that Tottenham are also interested. How close are United to signing Reguilon? And what's holding up? Because there's a lot of talks about this buyback clause that seems to be causing a lot of issues.
Yeah, I don't know much from the Manchester United side, but obviously this is a guy that's out of favour at Real Madrid, that had a great season on loan at Sevilla. He's returned to Real Madrid. Sevilla can't afford to pay what Real Madrid want for him. Real Madrid have obviously got Mendy and Marcelo, so he's the third choice left back. Real Madrid are in a position where they need to bring in money. So he's a player, as we've seen with a couple of players that they've sold this summer, that can go, that's been told he can go. And for that reason, there's a relatively cheap price when you compare it to, the prices that clubs in England have paid for fullbacks, for English fullbacks. If you look at, like Chilwell, Kyle Walker and stuff like that. Whereas Reguilon is a player who would be available for 20, 25 million. Like you say, the thing with Real Madrid and Barcelona when they sell is they often want these sell-on clauses or these buyback clauses included so that they can sort of protect their asset if he goes to Manchester United or Tottenham or wherever he may go and has a great season. But while that often works with certain clubs, for a club of Manchester United's stature, it's not really something they'd be keen to do because they consider themselves on a par with clubs like Real Madrid. These are historically Europe's great clubs. They don't want to be seen as like a feeder club for Real Madrid, someone who can develop a player. So I can imagine that would be a sticking point when it comes to negotiations for someone like Ed Woodward or whoever Manchester United have negotiating this deal with Reguilon, Real Madrid and his people.
Yeah, absolutely. I think look, I have two thoughts on that. I mean, I think my view, maybe this is wrong, but if you get 2 or 3 brilliant years out of him and Real Madrid are buying him back, to me, that suggests that he's been a success. You've got what you wanted from the player and off he goes back to his boyhood club. I mean, am I right in suggesting that is he a player that is surplus to requirements because he's not considered good enough? Or is he a player just purely because they have Mendy and Marcelo, great options, that he is surplus to requirements? Because there are a few United fans scratching their heads. I mean, I've seen him play quite a few times and I like what I see, especially going forward. But a lot of United fans are questioning whether they want a cast off. And I know that's a very disrespectful probably word to say, but would you say he's someone who can be a top left back?
Yeah, I mean, it would be unfair to call him a cast off, I think, because it's more of a preference thing than anything else. Since Zinedine Zidane's come back in, he's fallen out of favour and obviously was sent out on loan last season. But if we go back to the season before that, when Julian Lopetegui came in, he was actually Real Madrid's first choice left back. He displaced Marcelo and he looked like, he was going to be Real Madrid's left back for the next few years. Obviously, then Zidane comes back, they sign Mendy. Marcelo, not so much reinvigorates himself, but is sort of, happy playing that rotation role with Mendy. So yeah, it's more a case of preferences, personal preferences. Obviously, Lopetegui, who was the Spain manager, the Real Madrid manager, is obviously a big fan of him. Took him to Sevilla, got the best out of him again. And he's been linked with, before Manchester United with Chelsea. So I think to call him a cast-off is unfair. he's obviously not yet at that elite level. He's not, one of the. You wouldn't be able to call him the best left back in the world or among the best left backs in the world. I don't know if he has that potential. I must admit, I was surprised when he was given the chance at Real Madrid by Lopetegui, because he hadn't sort of stood out massively for Castilla, but he did do well for Real Madrid. He's had a great season at Sevilla. I think that's where we've really seen him at his best, in a team with a little bit less pressure than Real Madrid, especially when they were with Lopetegui and they were going through a bad spell. It wasn't a nice time to be a Real Madrid player. It was a negative atmosphere to be involved in, and that's often not a nice environment to come into as a player. But Sevilla really flourished last season. I think he would have gone back there if the price was cheaper. But obviously that's too much for Seville and how they do their business. So I think the next logical step is to leave Madrid for a big European club, whether that's an English club or somewhere in Italy. There's obviously no one in Spain that could afford him, even though there's been a few sort of cheeky comments from Barcelona fans about maybe they should go for him, because they're well covered at left back at the moment, but there is the chance that they sell Junior Firpo, or obviously there's a lot of pressure under Jordi Alba as well at the moment, so they're going to be needing a left back at some point in the future as well.
Yeah, that would be quite some story, wouldn't it? So if I had to say to you now, do you expect him to move to the Premier League or to United? What would you say? Because what are the stories coming out of Spain? Because it does seem that he's interested in the move. That's what's been reported today. But again, it's just his buyback clause. Do you think if United can sort that out with Real Madrid, that they'll get their man?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm sure Real Madrid are open to selling, as we said earlier. It's just a case of Manchester United agreeing to what they pay or negotiating a deal if it is to be United. But I would say when the transfer window closes, I guess October the 6th, isn't it? I'd say he won't be a Real Madrid player, so it's just a case of whoever pays up and can do the deal with Real Madrid.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Thiago. I know he obviously is at Bayern Munich, so it's not really a player in the La Liga, but obviously he's come through Barcelona. Didn't really get the opportunity there. He's gone to Bayern Munich, and he's probably established himself as one of the best midfielders in the world, I'd say. A wonderful player. I think he's someone who particularly shone this year. I think he led Bayern Munich to the European Cup. He was very, very influential. He was almost like the conductor in midfield. Obviously, there's talks that he wants to leave. He heavily wants to leave, and there's Liverpool and Manchester United seemingly vying for him. But is there any truth in the hierarchy of Barcelona being interested in him? And I know it seems that we might as well bring Wijnaldum into this as well. I know it seems that Koeman wants Wijnaldum, but can you see a possibility of Thiago going to Barcelona? Because it seems that he's on his way to the Premier League, but not really sure whether it's Liverpool or United.
Yeah, I mean, without straying too much into Barcelona's situation, because it's complicated and we'll get there later. But with regards to Thiago, we've been told by the club, my colleague Moises Llorens at ESPN has been told repeatedly that this isn't a player that's gonna end up back at Barcelona this summer. That's come from the club. He's not a player they can afford or that they're chasing. They have whether that's because they have other priorities or whether because they can't afford it. We'll get to in a bit. But no, they've categorically denied that he'll be coming back. One thing that was also missed in all that when we were sort of talking about, will he, won't he come back? Could Barcelona be interested? Was whether he would want to come back as well. This was a player that didn't get enough chances, so left. La Masia players don't often like leaving Barcelona unless they really have to. So while he didn't leave on bad terms, I think he left, disappointed to not have had enough chances at Barcelona. Obviously, as we've seen with the whole Lionel Messi affair, the club isn't in a great place right now. So is this somewhere where he wants to come for the final years of his career? I think we've seen quite clearly from what he said and what he suggested and what's come from his people that he wants, another challenge, a new challenge, and I think that's in England for him.
Yeah, I agree. And do you expect him to go to Liverpool or United?
I mean, I think Liverpool will be crazy if they don't push this deal over the line. I mean, I know they're talking about how they're not one of the clubs that can just go out and spend that maybe Chelsea and Manchester City can. But when a player like Thiago becomes available for 30 million or 25 million or whatever they can get it for, obviously I guess Bayern would maybe relent as we come up towards the transfer deadline with just a year to go on his contract. They're a well-run club. I'm sure they'd rather take the money than let him go for free next summer. So yeah, I think Liverpool would be crazy if they don't get this done. I think that's what Thiago wants. Obviously, seems strange to say given growing up in the years of so much Manchester United success. But if you're a player right now, you're probably going to want to go and play for Liverpool. The Champions League winners 2 years ago, the Premier League winners now, still club world champions. Play under Klopp, play with, you've got those great forward line who I'm sure he would have a great relationship with. They're a team with a very obvious style, a clear pattern of play where you could see where he could fit in. So I think I mean, I don't have this confirmed. I would imagine he would prefer the Liverpool move, and I think they should get it done, because I think he's a midfielder that would strengthen them. As good as they are as a unit, I think that they can improve in midfield.
Yeah, they're definitely lacking that extra bit of quality that takes them to the next level. I think you look at the midfield; it's actually very workmanlike. And let's tie this to Wijnaldum. And I think I spoke to a Liverpool journalist the other day, and he doesn't think that move is going to happen unless Wijnaldum goes, obviously, because Liverpool's money situation is very tight at the moment. Can you see Wijnaldum moving to Barcelona? For me, it's a very strange one. I think he's been a good addition to Liverpool. I think he's an underrated player. I think a lot of people are actually sort of downgrading his ability. But is he really the sort of player that Barcelona need in that midfield and that can put them back on the right track?
Barcelona fans aren't convinced. It's a funny one, because they have, obviously, Barcelona have, in theory, they have this very defined way of playing, and they imagine that someone like Wijnaldum maybe wouldn't fit their style of play. But the way the game has evolved, there's also an acknowledgement at the club these days that, you know, sometimes they do need another profile of midfielder or attacker. We saw them sign Paulinho a couple of years ago from China, and he came in and he had a good season despite the sort of the jokes that were made at the start. And then he left, and then Arturo Vidal came in, who's another player with a different profile to Barca, but a midfielder who, you know, adds something different. You need to have options, especially at the top level, especially over the course of the season. So I think that's the thinking with Wijnaldum, is to add a more physical profile, a more workmanlike profile, someone who gets up and down. Maybe, I mean, I'm not saying his technique is not good, but it's not, you know, you don't think of Wijnaldum as, you know, a Ricky Puig or a Xavi Iniesta type midfielder. But it's not one that's come from the club. It's one that's purely come from Ronald Koeman. Since the appointment of Ronald Koeman, I think the day Koeman was appointed, an agent who has a player at Barcelona said to me, watch out for Wijnaldum. And then within like a couple of weeks, we saw these rumours emerging, and they've obviously sort of been confirmed from within the club and stuff that there is an interest there. But if we'd have been speaking a few days ago, I think I'd have said maybe I really expect this one to get done somehow. But I think the chances of that happening have diminished a little bit over this last week due to a couple of things on both sides. There's a real problem at Barca moving players on for A, transfer fees, and then B, some of the big earners to reduce the wage bill. So in terms of them signing players, they're just not in a position where they can sign players. Even if Wijnaldum in the final year of his contract is going to cost 20 million, they're not really in a position where they can commit to that right now. They would have to move players on first. They need to move Arturo Vidal's wage bill off the books. They need to, you know, sell players like Rafinha, preferably for cash. So they're just not in a position to sign him at the moment. It's just looking really, really complicated. They still have a lot of midfielders. And then also, and this isn't information that I have firsthand, but I've obviously seen that Wijnaldum's returned from international duty. He's spoken with Klopp. He obviously played against Leeds. It seems that maybe he, while he did have his head turned by the chance of signing for Barcelona, even though they're in a much inferior, weaker position to Barcelona at the moment, I guess obviously the name is still massive for players if you're linked with them, and obviously his relationship with Koeman and Frenkie de Jong. But it seems that he's possibly, I mean, like I say, this isn't information that I have, but it seems that he's possibly happy to stay at Liverpool, whether that will be signing a new contract to extend or to weigh up his options and possibly go for free next summer.
Yeah, it's the Barca situation. It's a mess. I'll ask you, obviously, we're going to talk about it later, but let's quickly touch on Van der Beek. I know I didn't send this over to you, but Van der Beek's a player who I thought would go to Barcelona. Obviously, the money situation is a problem, but was there concrete interest in him? Because he's definitely the sort of player I think that would fit the style of play and the sort of profile that Barcelona should be looking for.
I've never had it confirmed that Barcelona were interested in him, and I think if there was any interest in him, I think it would, like Wijnaldum, it would have just have been on the back of the Koeman appointment. Because what is true and what has been passed on is that he was close to signing to Real Madrid, obviously a couple of times. Last summer, the first time, and possibly again in the winter. Real Madrid were in the market for a midfielder, but Real Madrid are a club like Barca who have just been left sort of strapped, especially by the COVID situation, being left in a position where they can't sign this summer. And they're also, you look at Barca's midfield, you look at Real Madrid's midfield, they still have, Toni Kroos isn't that old. They have obviously Luka Modric is still there at 35, but then they have other players coming through, like Valverde had a great season last season. They have Casemiro still, so there wasn't a pressing need for them. So I think the Spanish interest was there, definitely from Real Madrid, possibly from Barcelona, possibly more so when Koeman took over. but neither were in a position to pay 40, 45 million for a player who's not going to come in and definitely be a starter at either club.
Yeah, I agree. I think the links are very tenuous. You kind of put obviously the Koeman and obviously the Dutch links 2 and 2, and you get 5. So I'd agree with that. I think United got a good deal there. He seems like a very good player from what I've seen of him. So let's move on to a player who divides opinion, I'd say, and that's the one Gareth Bale. And look, people are on two sides with this because obviously he's someone that has come in and had immense success at Real. Obviously, he's won multiple Champions Leagues. He's scored some big goals, but it seems to me there's been a breakdown in relationship there, and he is obviously surplus to requirements from Zidane. How likely is it that he gets a move, let's say, to Manchester United or his example, or another club this summer? Or is he just going to sit on the bench and just collect his wage each week and go and play golf?
Yeah, the Bale situation's one that's been out there for a while now. There's no secret, is there? I've been up and down with it, to be honest. After the Golf Wales Madrid thing, or the Wales Golf Madrid banner, in that order, I sort of took his side a bit more. I was like, fair play to him, because there'd been a sustained period during his Madrid. Like you say, he scored some big goals, some great goals, some important goals, but he was never really accepted at Real Madrid. You know, the fans and the press. He's had moments, but he's often been criticised, overly criticised, for things like playing golf, which isn't a massive, problem. You know, there are players that go out drinking and stuff all the time and have far worse vices than golf. Obviously, they argue it can be like a physical thing, but he was definitely unfairly treated with that. So I kind of liked him when he started fighting back a bit, showing a bit of fight. You know, every training picture he was there doing a golf pose and little things. And then he did the interview with the Golf Channel, which was quite good. Now I'm getting to the stage where I think they're both just, it's just at that stage of the relationship now where they're both just out of order. I think Bale's probably pushed it a little bit too far with some of the antics on the bench and stuff, which was funny as well, the snoozing and stuff. But he also has to be professional. This is a club that's paying him a massive wage. So while I think he was within his rights to fight back, I think he maybe needs to tone it down a little bit now, and Real Madrid obviously need to go a little bit easier on him. But I think they're in a real standoff, because I think he's shown that he's, a lot of players sort of, push it. But when it comes to it, what they really want to do is play. They want to go and play for a club, whether that's a lesser club than Real Madrid, whether that's another big club in another big league, whether that's going to, to China or the MLS. Whereas what we've seen with Bale is he's shown that I think he still does have that passion for football. We've seen it when he plays for Wales. I think he would love to find another home and do well. But at the same time, he's also happy to stay at Real Madrid if that's what he has to do, even if that means not playing. So I think they're in a real standoff. I'd be surprised if he comes to the Premier League. Obviously, last year he was close to China. That broke down, he says, because of Real Madrid. So I just don't know what's going to happen over the next month. It's sort of just whoever blinks first game of poker, really. I don't know how serious the interest is in England. Whether Manchester United will be able to pay the wages. Obviously, their preference would be Jadon Sancho, and I think signing Bale is a tricky one, because you look at his injury history, you look at his age, you look at his wages, you look at the way United are going, sort of signing younger, hungrier players. Is Bale someone that they want, with the risk that he comes in, that he gets injured, that he's it's not straightforward. So I think it's a really, really tricky situation. I think there's obviously going to be lots of twists and turns, but we've seen from Bale and his agent Barnett regularly, they're just gonna keep their faces absolute poker face, and they're just gonna, like, if we have to stay here and pick up a wage, that's what we're going to do, because we're not bothered.
Absolutely. I find myself exactly the same as you. One day I'm thinking, good on you, Bale, because Real Madrid do have a history of, casting players aside, like it's anything. But then other days I think, look, do you not want to go and play week in, week out? Just go and prove what an incredible footballer you can be, because he's a wonderful footballer. And it's a shame. Sometimes I think, was it the right move? But then you look at he has his trophies and medals to show that, of course, it was the right move. But you mentioned Jadon Sancho. I know obviously you focus more on La Liga, but I want to ask your opinion, and maybe I'm sure you're connected in circles. You might have heard things here and there, but do you expect Jadon Sancho to make a move to Man United this summer? The reason why I asked about Bale is because reports today are suggesting that he is an alternative, and I think he possibly could be an alternative. But do you think it's all or nothing with Sancho from what you've heard?
I think it should be. I think when you look at the alternatives, if Manchester United want Sancho, they should sign Sancho or no one there. I think it would be a risk to try and sign an alternative just because they feel like they have to strengthen that position. You should wait, and you should sign the right player. Don't panic because you didn't get Sancho. And I don't think I'm stealing this from someone else. I can't remember if I read it somewhere or someone said it, so I can't accredit it. But someone said, they should have had a backup plan long in place for a long time if they didn't want Sancho. If you look at Manchester City signing Ferran Torres, he would probably have been a viable backup. But you look at these guys; they've been snapped up early in the summer. Even it sounds ridiculous to say it, and obviously that Bayern Munich was lined up for ages, and City would never sell him. But like Leroy Sané, like all these wingers that were available, they were snapped up quickly. They went early in the summer, so I don't think they should back down from Sancho. I think they should probably pay it, because I think there's a real danger that if they don't pay the money for him this summer, that next summer there's interest from elsewhere. There's no concrete interest from Barcelona or Real Madrid at this stage, and Barcelona, who knows where they will be in a year, or where Real Madrid will be, and obviously Madrid's priority is Mbappe. But these are clubs that have, like all big clubs, like it's no secret that they watch players like Sancho a lot, like someone that's on their radar, even if there's no firm or concrete interest. And if a year down the line Lionel Messi goes, or if Benzema and Hazard are both sort of 30s now, if Real Madrid decide they want someone else alongside Mbappe, he's going to be someone they're looking at. So if Manchester United haven't got that deal done this summer, they're going to probably face more competition next summer, and maybe even teams in England as well will be looking at him again next summer. Manchester City, if the Messi thing doesn't happen when his contract ends, so it feels like it has to be not now or never, but it feels important that Manchester United do it this summer when they're in a position to do it and other clubs aren't.
I completely agree, and actually my phrase for the whole sort of saga has been, it is now or never. That's kind of my opinion. I think I did speak to someone and they said, yeah, they agreed with you. While there wasn't any firm or concrete interest from Barcelona, there have been suggestions that he could be an option if Lionel Messi did leave. That's how highly he's rated. So I agree with you. The reason why I asked the Bale thing is obviously to see whether there was an option for him as an alternative. But I think United would do well probably to pass on that, because you don't know how, one, his injury record for Bale, and two, also his desire. You don't know if it's still there. But let's move on to Pau Torres, because he's a player again who's been linked to Manchester United as well. There are reports that he has been possibly their first or second choice centre back. With the release clause, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Obviously, money is fairly tight, and money probably will go towards Sancho. But just tell the listeners what sort of player he is, because he's very highly rated in Spain, and I think a lot of people in the Premier League, especially, they don't really know what sort of player he is. And where do you expect him to end up? Obviously, he's not moving this summer, but can you see him at one of the big two Spanish clubs?
Yeah, definitely. That's the way he's heading at the moment. Barcelona, there's very, very real interest in Pau Torres. They've obviously got a list of sort of 3 or 4 centre-backs sort of for the future. Gerard Piqué is 33 now, and Pau Torres is one of them, along with obviously Eric Garcia at Manchester City. They like the young French guy who's coming through at Sevilla, Koundé. So they're sort of 3 of the players they're sounding out for the future. Pau Torres is one of those defenders that seems to be very much in vogue at the moment. The left-footed, left-sided centre back, which seems to be everyone's decided. I don't know if this is just a new thing or if it's always been a thing, and now we've just decided that everyone has to sort of go on about it. But he's obviously the left-footed, left-sided centre back, which is obviously
definitely something this summer. I've heard it multiple times. You look at Gabriel, he's just gone to Arsenal. And Nathan Ake was another one at Man City. It's some sort of fad, isn't it, at the moment? Yeah.
So positionally, he fits that box. He ticks that box. He's tall. I don't know for sure, but I think he must be at least sort of 6'2", 6'3". But obviously, he's come through at Villarreal. He's spent his whole career at Villarreal, bar a loan spell at Malaga, and Villarreal are a club who, most Spanish clubs, when you watch La Liga, people who sort of watch it even just as a one-off often remark to me about, how much more technical you see it just from the off compared to the Premier League. So he's obviously a player that's come through at Villarreal, a club who especially play nice football. You've got that mid-range clubs who sort of try and prioritise the way they play, like, Real Betis and Villarreal. So even though he's tall, he's a centre-back that can play. He looks like he's now going to be the, number 1 or the number 2 centre-back for Spain alongside Sergio Ramos. That looks like the partnership that Luis Enrique is going to go with. So that's only going to further boost his reputation that he's the Spain starting centre-back. I think it's probably the right decision for him to stay at Villarreal this season, though, because if you look at last season was his first season in La Liga with Villarreal. The season before that, he was on loan in La Segunda, the second division with Malaga. So I don't think a second season with Villarreal in La Liga, they've improved. They've got a lot of good players. They've got Unai Emery, who, while he sort of lost a bit of credit in England, he's always maintained a high reputation in Spain because of his work with Valencia and Sevilla, and he's often got teams into the top 4. They've made some good signings. So I think it's a good season and a good time to be at Villarreal. And I think next summer, if he keeps on, I think we could see a club pay his release clause. Yeah, and it could even be that we see Barcelona or Real Madrid pay his release clause. Other than that, it's only going to be an English club that could afford him. But that's the trajectory he's on at the moment. Let's see if he can stay fit and continue to improve this season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Emery's. I think it's quite an interesting option for Villarreal. I said to someone I spoke to the other day when you came on the podcast, I said I expect Villarreal to have a good season and be top 4. I think Emery will restore some of his reputation. Obviously, he lost at Arsenal, but how real was the interest from United? What have you heard in the circles?
Well, no, because obviously I've been so focused on Barcelona this summer. There's been so much going on. I haven't really been tracking Pau Torres. There was a little bit of interest earlier in the summer from Barcelona, and I reached out, and that was sort of, as we touched on with Barca before, that was never really going to happen because of their financial situation at the moment and their other priorities. So I can't offer any sort of insight into how real the Manchester United interest is. But like you say, I'd imagine with their priorities, with the signings they've already made, I'm not sure they'll be able to spend big on a centre back this summer.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it seems to be a Van der Beek, maybe a Sancho, and possibly maybe a Reguilon. But let's move on to Barcelona, because obviously that's your bread and butter, and there's a lot to go through. But the obvious place to start, obviously, is Lionel Messi, and also just the current situation, sort of financial and obviously the manager appointments. So I'm just going to ask you, was Messi ever serious about leaving? What is the real financial situation of Barcelona, and your thoughts on Ronald Koeman as manager? Because I'm quite surprised by that appointment.
Yeah, I don't think there can be any doubts that Messi was serious about leaving. It's not. I mean, his decision to stay, if you will, was reported as a U-turn. It certainly wasn't a U-turn, but he basically backed down. He decided not to pursue the legal route, which was what would have been required to sort of take the club to court over this clause in his contract that he believed meant that he could terminate his contract, and the club said the deadline had passed. So it wasn't a fact of him performing a U-turn saying, actually, I will stay. It was him basically saying, look, I'm not going to take this to court. I'm not going to fight anymore. I'm going to carry on doing my job because that's what I do. I'm a footballer. So I don't think there are any doubts about whether Messi wanted to leave or not. So, yeah.
No, I just think it's just one of those where I could never see it happening, and I think that's obviously been put to bed. And what is the financial situation at Barcelona? Because it would have made more sense actually if Barcelona got Messi off the books. Obviously, no matter how good he is, he's the greatest player of all time. But financially, there's obviously issues there. Would it have been a better idea to get him off the books and actually to push forward with the proper rebuild? Yeah, for sure. I mean, there were voices. It was a minority, but there were people behind the scenes on the board of the club who were sort of like, come on, like this wouldn't be the worst thing. If we can bring in sort of 150 million for him, plus we lose his, 90, 100 million wages off the wage bill, it gives us the chance for a real fresh start. The problem is, how do they sell the move to the fans, to the players, to the club, to the socios, to the members, and it's really hard to do. So I don't think they were ever likely to do that. They were always going to fight, and if he was going to leave, it was going to be through Messi being the bad guy or through Man City being the bad guys, and Guardiola was never going to be through the club sort of accepting to let him go. Even though there would maybe have been a middle ground if they'd have said, look, if you want to go, we'll accept. Name the figure, and if Man City can pay this and pay you wages and comply with the financial fair play rules, then we'll accept it. But they didn't even get that far in the end. Once Messi decided to step back on the legal action. But yeah, there was definitely that way of thinking. It would have been easier to get rid of Messi and then start the rebuild than to not, for sure. He's 33 now, he'd be 34 when his contract ends. He could leave for free. They could have bought him money this summer. I mean, just to be clear, I don't think they should ever have let him go. I mean, just for what he means for the club, what he still is for the club, how good he still is. I think for me, maybe I'm biased just because I see him every week, but for me, still the best player in the world. I mean, he's over 20 goals and over 20 assists in the Liga last season, playing from a deeper and deeper role. I just think you can't replace that. And if they'd have sold him, there would have been I don't know, not necessarily real turmoil, because maybe we would have seen other players step up, like Griezmann, like Dembele, like Coutinho, perhaps. But it wouldn't have been a good look. And I just think that he has to. I mean, there's no happy ending now because of the way this has happened. It's just. I mean, I guess there can still be a happy ending if a new president comes in and Messi sort of buys into the new project and has another couple of years. But it just feels a little bit tainted, the relationship, and the way it ended so sadly with him, not even, like we said, not even performing a U-turn, but sort of just
reluctantly agreeing to stay at the same time as just firing shots at the board.
Yes, it's a sad situation, isn't it? Because Messi for me is Barcelona, and I would love to see him in the Premier League. That's what, even if it was at Man City. I'm a United fan, obviously, as you probably can tell from my questions. But I would have loved to see him in the Premier League. I think it would have been a real spectacle. But let's move on to Koeman quickly before I ask you about former players. But Koeman signing, good decision, or are you expecting it to be a difficult season for him?
I think you have to expect it to be a difficult season. I mean, logic suggests that it's not a good appointment. He didn't do a great job at Everton. He did okay at Southampton, but he's not remembered particularly fondly by some of the Valencia players, where despite winning the Copa del Rey, fell out with a lot of the more experienced, a lot of the better players that had helped that Valencia team win league titles. I think he's had an up and down managerial career, but there's not been a lot in the last 10 years to suggest that he's capable to manage at the top level. Would he have got any other job on a par with Barcelona is what you have to think about. Would he have got even the United job, the Liverpool job? Would he have got the Real Madrid job? Obviously not, because of the Barcelona links, but he wouldn't even have been a candidate. But the thing with Real Madrid and Barcelona, and this is me sitting on the fence a little bit to cover myself in case he does do well, but you never really know who's going to make a good manager there. I mean, there's just different elements of the job which don't necessarily translate to usual coaching jobs, especially at Barcelona at the moment, and Real Madrid, where you've got so many players that have been at the top level and won things with Spain and their clubs over the last decade, that they're such big players to manage that the job is almost more managing the dressing room than sort of the tactics and the playing side of things. Whether Koeman will be able to do that is another thing, because he's obviously got history for being quite abrasive, but he was doing well with the Netherlands before he came. I think it'd be good for Frenkie de Jong, and I think that would be important, because I think Frenkie de Jong is probably going to be Barca's most important player behind Messi this season. He could be good for the young players, for Ansu Fati, for Griezmann. He's obviously put a lot of confidence in him already. And, Barca coaches with a history with the club often tend to do better than those that don't. If you look at the ones that have, if you look at Guardiola, Luis Enrique and Ernesto Valverde, they're the three coaches that have won the league since Guardiola was appointed in 2008. Obviously, Valverde wasn't at the same level as Guardiola and Luis Enrique in terms of playing for the club, but he did play for the club. He did have that link. He did know the club, the workings of the club, because it's such a political club. It's such a complicated club to get to grips with just behind the scenes and on a day-to-day level, that knowledge of the club helps. So Koeman obviously has that as being a player at the club, and not just a player at the club, a really successful player under Johan Cruyff, who's like one of the gods at the club, along with Messi and Guardiola to a certain extent. So he has that history, that know-how. He scored the winning goal when they won their first Champions League. He was assistant to Louis van Gaal at the turn of the millennium at the club, so he knows the club. So there is that element which will play in his favour, and it will also buy him a little bit of time if things do go not wrong, but if things perhaps don't go quite as well as expected to start with.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, isn't it? I do see something similar as well to a club like Manchester United, where there's more than just managing the club. There's so many other things, and funnily enough, Solskjaer seems to be the one who's probably been the best since Sir Alex went. So there's more. Being part of the club and the history actually has a lot of bearings. So no, I agree with that. Me personally, I think Koeman might not last the season, but let's see. But obviously, I'm not a Barcelona journalist, so I can say that.
No. The thing with Koeman is Barca obviously have presidential elections coming up in March. They also have a vote of no confidence against the board at the moment. So if that gets passed, the elections could be brought forward, and a new president is likely to want to bring in a new manager. Several of the candidates have already said that if they're elected, they will bring back Xavi. One even went as far as to say, look, even if Koeman wins the treble this season, he's still going to bring in Xavi as manager. So you have to add that to the fact that he's an appointment that is not definitely going to work anyway. And even if he does work, there's the added threat that a new president comes in and says, thanks, Ronald, but Xavi's coming in.
Absolutely crazy. That's definitely one to look out for. Let's move on. Former players, all linked to Barcelona or playing for Barcelona. So Antoine Griezmann, someone who came in with a very big price tag, didn't really hit it off, did he? Obviously, there are lots of reports that he can't play with Messi, or Messi prefers to play with Suarez. Looks like Suarez is out the door. I did see a few rumours that it looks like Griezmann could leave. I don't think it's likely, but you expecting Griezmann to stay and take that number 9 spot?
Yeah, I'm expecting Griezmann to stay. He's changed his shirt number. He was given the number 7 shirt this week, and he started. Barca had their first friendly last night, and he started in the central striker role, if you will. Koeman sort of played. I mean, I'm not massively one for formations because I think they're quite flexible, but in theory, it was kind of a 4-2-3-1 with Messi playing just behind Griezmann, Dembele to the left, a youngster called Pedri played to the right. Obviously, it wasn't the strongest 11; it was a mixed 11, but that was the first half team. So I think we're going to see Griezmann given a run down the middle for sure. The club are doing all they can to get rid of Suarez. There's a little bit of a fight there over whether he's going to get the final year of his contract paid off or not. That's rumbling on and holding up him leaving. But the club want him gone. They're threatening him with not playing him all season if he stays, if he hangs around. And yeah, Koeman's going to put his faith in Griezmann for now, pending what happens with interest in other players, like maybe who you're going to ask about, like Lautaro Martinez at Inter and Depay, Memphis Depay, obviously with the caveat that Barca, as we've said a couple of times, aren't in a position to make any signings at the moment.
Yeah, that was my next one. Depay, is it true personal terms are okay, and it's just about, obviously, if they can sell a few, they'll be able to afford it?
Yeah, I mean, there's been discussions with Memphis's people, the interest has been expressed, and there's a loose sort of agreement with the player. But as I understand it, it's not necessarily a case of, this means we're going to sign you if we can move players X, Y, and Z on and afford the fee. It's more a case of that's in place now. If players go, if they don't sign other targets, that's all in place. If they then need to sign them, it's not guaranteed that anything's going to happen. There hasn't been any talks with Lyon. Well, I haven't been working today, but before this weekend, there hadn't been any approach to Lyon or anything like that. Their preferred long-time target has always been Lautaro Martinez, the Inter Milan striker. The cost of that deal was not just holding it up; it's completely stopped it for the time being. Prior to COVID, that was a deal that was probably about 90% going to happen. But Inter are looking at upwards of towards 100 million euros, which is just not a fee that Barca are going to be in a position to play, even if they sort of include players like the left back Junior Firpo has been mentioned. They're probably going to let. I mean, I expect it to be announced tomorrow or Tuesday. I think Arturo Vidal is going to join Inter. Barca are going to let him go for nothing, for free, as sort of a gesture towards possibly signing Lautaro. But I just can't see how they get in a position to do that deal this summer. So whether they wait for him this year or go for Memphis, who's, again, as we've said before, is a player who's not been particularly of interest to the club in the past, but since the appointment of Koeman, another Dutch player, another player Koeman knows, who feels could boost the attack, that link's there. And the danger is Koeman, as we just said, is not guaranteed to be in the job in 6 months, let alone a year. So do you want to give him, even though they have transmitted to him that he can have complete sort of power over the rebuild, there must be some sort of wariness, because we've seen over the last 4 years a number of different sporting directors. We're now on to the third coach of the last sort of 12 months. And as you know, as you touched on being a Manchester United fan, you can see the damage that does when different people get involved and make their own signings. You end up with a mishmash squad and coaches that don't want certain players who've maybe cost a lot of money or are commanding big wages, and it just ends up really unbalanced. So I think there's a lot to think of with Memphis, but it is true that there's been talks with his people, and that there's a loose agreement over a potential deal, which is still a long way down the line.
Yeah, you're completely right about the mishmash of players. It's a very dangerous road. It can set you back years. Like you said, United, 4 managers, 4 different styles, 7 years since the greatest manager we've ever had is retired, and you look no closer to winning the title. So what I will say about Memphis, having watched them at United, I think obviously it was a bit of a case of too much too soon, but I don't see why Barcelona would go for him, if I'm being honest. He probably will be more of a backup option, but I think he's found his level, and it's one that puzzles me. But if it happens, I wish him all the best, because I think there is some talent there, but I don't think he's quite at the required level at Barcelona. But let's move on to the last player, and then you mentioned him. He played in the friendly the other day, Ousmane Dembele, and he's a player that came with massive expectations, and his injury record has really been atrocious. And was there any truth in him, Barcelona looking to let him go in the summer? I know earlier on, again, he was another one mentioned as an alternative to Sancho, along with the likes of Bale and Douglas Costa from Juventus. But was there any appetite to move him on, or do Barca really think, right, last chance saloon now, we need you to work, otherwise you're out the door next season?
Yeah, it's a difficult one with Ousmane Dembele. What you have to understand with Barcelona is there are a lot of people in charge of decision making, from sporting directors to directors to the president to the coach. And there are a lot of people that want to talk to the local press or to say certain things. So there have been mixed messages with Dembele. The party line has always been, we're going to give this guy another chance, and he's going to get a chance to prove his fitness to really go, because we still trust in this player. Bartomeu has always said publicly that he's as good, if not better, than Neymar. We haven't seen that yet. Obviously, he arrived with the Neymar money when Neymar left. But there have also been whispers, and there have been people at the club who have said, if a big offer comes in for Dembele this summer, if someone's willing to pay, then the club will consider it, because of the financial situation, because of the number of bodies they've got in attack, because of his injury history. Obviously, that's not been the case because of COVID. And also, I just don't think there's any club that would be prepared to pay that price, take that gamble on Dembele for all the talent that he has, just because he's had such a torrid time with injuries. You could end up with a really, really damaged player. So he's gonna get another chance at Barca. He started again yesterday, his first game since November, I think. So he's obviously not played a competitive game yet, but he came through 45 minutes. He's going to be given a chance under Koeman. We've seen glimpses of him, but he just really needs to stay fit. I mean, there's nothing else for it. We've seen great talent, great skill, great speed. He scores goals, both footed, can play right, can play left. And it's something Barca have missed in the last sort of 2 years, that pace. They've become slower and slower. So they're going to be looking to Dembele and to Ansu to sort of provide that pace, because to be at the top level these days, to be a top team, you need to have that in your game. You can't not have pace in the side, especially in attack. They've been slow to counter. Messi and Suarez have been slowing down, but they've been obviously increasingly dependent on them, and they end up just sort of failing to kill teams off, or to find spaces, or to hit teams on the counter. So Dembele is going to be really important in terms of that, and Koeman's obviously going to be looking at him and Ansu to sort of provide a new cutting edge, because they need to find other ways to beat teams other than just Messi.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's really tough one. It's a shame, but you can be the most talented player in the world, but if you can't keep fit, what's the point? That's probably one of anyone's biggest asset, isn't it? Being able to keep fit and being able to be relied upon. But Sam, I'm conscious I've gone a little bit over time, but thank you very much for joining me today. It's been an absolute pleasure. Just let the listeners know where they can find you on Twitter and any your pieces of work as well.
No, just on ESPN or Diario Sport, or on Twitter at Samuel Marsden. That's me.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for coming on. And all to listeners, please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. We've got some more journalists coming on, but Sam's been absolutely brilliant today.